Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 167 for the 7th of Iyar in a leap year. So today we're going to be talking about something really interesting. We're going to be discussing our relationship with God, which is the big theme of the Tanya, if you haven't noticed, and talk about this relationship using the imagery of a husband and a wife, and specifically using the imagery of kissing and hugging, and the idea of a betrothal, which is the specifically, when the husband basically decides this is the woman that I want to marry, and he sets out and he makes that commitment to her. So it's a very interesting comparison. And again, to give this context, what we've been discussing in this chapter so far is really learning how to love God as a way of reciprocity for his love towards us. And we've been getting really deeply into understanding the extent of that and understanding how, first of all, it's natural to feel a feeling of love towards somebody who shows you love, regardless of who that person is. And all the more so would this be the case if there was a really big gap in terms of the level of the person who's showing the love and the person receiving the love. So like, for example, if a king were to show love to a bum on the street, the amount of love that the bum would display towards the king would most likely be like really, really, really intense. And we've been discussing the greatness of God and how infinite God is and how it's really beyond our comprehension, really, how great he is. Like when we think of like the richest person in the world, Elon Musk, or a president of a really big country or something like that. So God is beyond all of these things. That was really our focus yesterday. And so today, what we're going to be talking about is how this infinite God, this great, great, great king that's so beyond our comprehension, who did he choose? Who did he decide to focus his love on? And who did he focus on betrothing is us. So let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of this. And so for context, we are still in the middle of chapter 46 of Likkutei Amarim. So here we go. So the Alter Rebbe begins, and he begins with a quote from Yeshayahu, chapter 6, verse 3, which talks about where it's describing the angels, and it's describing how the angels are discussing God's glory. And the angels say to one another, they say, where is the place of God's glory? Aye mekom kvodo. And the angels answer, Melo chol haaretz kvodo. The whole earth is filled with his glory. And so what is the whole earth filled with his glory? Like, how is it that God's glory is found here on earth? The Alter Rebbe says this is the Jewish people, that the Jewish people are God's glory. This is God's glory. So what does this mean? It means that God actually set aside all of the higher worlds and all of the lower worlds, like this whole retinue that we've been describing in the previous episode. He set aside all of that. And who did he choose? He specifically chose the Jewish people. He specifically chose us to be his nation. And he took us out of Egypt, which was the lowest of the lowest place of the earth. It was called like the lewdness of the earth, Ervat Haaretz. It's described as, this is in Bereshis, chapter 42, verse 9. It's described as that. It's a place of like total filth and impurity. And he took us out not through an angel and not through any shaliach, not through any emissary, but it was God himself that took us out of Egypt. And he came down into this place. He came down, and the Alter Rebbe brings a verse from Shemot chapter 3, verse 8, where it says, Vayred latzilo chule, which means, and I went down to rescue him. So God himself came down into the filth. It's like, again, the analogy of the king. Imagine if there was a homeless person living literally in a garbage dump. And imagine if that king actually went into the garbage dump himself to take this guy out of the garbage dump. So God did this in order to bring him close to him, and in a great and true unity, with a connection of souls, like a very soulful connection, and an aspect of kissing, a mouth-to-mouth kiss, like a kiss on the lips. And so what does that mean? So it's like, again, so this analogy, this is where we're coming into the analogy of a man and a woman. So it's saying that God wanted to connect with us in such a deep way that he wanted to kiss us. So what does the kiss mean? So on a superficial level, a kiss is where the mouth touches the other mouth. And so when it comes to God, this is when we speak words of halacha. This is when we learn God's will, basically. Like when we speak, when we're learning Torah on a very superficial level, on a basic level. This is, and then what else happens when two people kiss? So yes, their mouths touch. That's on a superficial level, but there's also an exchange of breath, and this exchange of breath can be described as spirit. It's like the spirit; they exchange spirits. There's a connection of spirit to spirit, and in this case, when it comes to God, this is through our understanding of Torah and through our understanding of His will and His chokhmah, and which are all the same with God, because we've described previously, that God is one with His wisdom and His will. So when we really not only just learn Torah on a superficial level, but when we really try to understand it, we're connecting our spirit with God's spirit, just like people connect breaths when they kiss. And then not only is there this aspect of kissing when it comes to God and His connection with us, there's also an aspect of a hug, of a chibuk, it's called in Hebrew. And so what is the hugging? How does God hug us? This is through us keeping the positive commandments that are the 248 positive commandments, which are likened to the organs of the king. So just like a physical king, if he were to come and hug a person, so that he's using his organs, his limbs to do this. So the 248 positive commandments are likened to the 248 organs or limbs of the king, as we talked about above. So you can go back and look at that. It's in chapter 23. We described how the 248 limbs of the king, or the 248 commandments, are likened to the limbs or organs of God. And in a general aspect, then we also see that all of the commandments, the 248 positive commandments, are divided into 3 different types that are likened to the right side, the left side, and the middle, which is, what does that mean? The right side, left side, and middle. So if you've been following along in Tanya already, then the right side is usually associated with chesed, with kindness, giving. The left side is associated with din, judgment, and the middle side is rachamim, the aspect of compassion or mercy. So every single one of the 248 commandments tends towards one of these things. It tends to be more oriented towards kindness or giving, or more severity or justice, or more compassion. And why is it divided into 3? This is likened to the 2 arms of a person and their body. So this is what makes up the hug. When a person hugs somebody, then they have 2 arms that hug the person, and there's the body that's hugging them. So if you visualize a hug, you'll see that that's what's going on. And then now the Alter Rebbe says that this is how we can understand the meaning of what is said. And we say this in many, many different brachos that we say. Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav. So, you may be familiar with a lot of different brachos we say before we eat, after we wash our hands, before we eat bread. We say, Baruch atah Hashem, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, and then we say whatever it is. So literally that means that He who betrothed us with His mitzvahs. So that's an interesting thing. So think about that. He who betrothed us with his mitzvah. So meaning to say, if a man wants to propose to a woman and he wants to get engaged to her, he'll usually bring a ring or some kind of jewelry or something to represent that this is his commitment to her. This is his way of betrothing her. And so in this case, how does God betroth himself to us? Is through his mitzvahs. So the Alter Rebbe explains this, and he says, just like a man who betroths himself to a woman in order to be totally unified with her, with total unity, as is explained. And then the Alter Rebbe cites a verse from Bereshis chapter 2, verse 24, where it says, V'davak be'ishto v'hayu levasar echad, that he should cleave to his wife and they will become one flesh. So the Alter Rebbe is really emphasizing the fact that when a man gets married to his wife, the idea is that they really, really become one. So this is exactly the type of unity, but to an infinite degree, which happens when to the godly soul, when it involves itself in Torah and mitzvahs, and to the vitalizing soul, which another word for that is the animal soul, and to its garments, which we described above, when it's involved in doing mitzvahs. So our godly soul and our vital soul, the entirety of us becomes unified with God, with the infinite one, blessed be he, to an infinite degree when we involve ourselves in his mitzvahs. So this is how God betroths himself, so to speak, to us through his mitzvahs, because betrothal, we know, is the idea of unity and really unifying with a person. And so God wants to unify with us in the same way. And so he does that through the mitzvahs and his Torah. So that is it for today. So again, in summary, basically what we learned is that this love that God has towards us is a really great thing, because first of all, love of anybody towards anybody would be really great and would lead to a reciprocity of love. And we also learned that God is not just a regular person. God is like a king, and even more than a king, is like to an infinite degree. It's like beyond our comprehension how great he is, and that he chose us and he wanted to be betrothed to us. And what does betrothal mean? It means really being united with us in really a very visceral sense. It's not just like this arranged marriage kind of thing. It's like we're talking about hugging and kissing, like really, really getting intimate here, becoming one flesh. And the way that this happens is through the kiss. First of all, is the speaking words of Torah on a very simple level, like speaking God's will, namely halacha. And then the breath that's exchanged in the kiss is actually trying to understand God's will. And then the hugging part that's actually performing his positive commandments. And so through all of this is how we can understand that God actually betroths himself to us and commits himself to us through the mitzvahs. So I hope that was interesting, and we will continue along these lines tomorrow, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.